Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you find this content helpful. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're talking about 3 books. The first one is the history of Susanna. The second one is a song of the 3 holy children. And the third one is Bel and the Dragon. The reason I put these 3 books under one topic or one discussion day is because they all are related to Daniel. They should have been part of the book of Daniel in the scriptures. And when you get to read them, you will see Daniel's involvement. All the events that are happening are during Daniel's time. So where are these events happening? These events are happening in Babylon. Here I have a little image of Babylon. On the far right, you can see this is the river Nile. This is a map from 1552. And to the right side of River Nile, where there's that red arrow, it's pointing to Babylon. This is the Red Sea down here, which is part of the Indian Ocean. So clearly, we're talking about Africa. This is where the events of these 3 books are taking place. Let me do something here. Let's see. Okay. So let's talk about the first book, which is the book of Susanna. Susanna. So what happens in the book of Susanna? First of all, we're going to learn about 2 judges who are appointed. These are elders who were appointed in Babylon to judge the people, to act as judges. And these were older people of that time. So they were considered to be wise, and therefore they were supposed to be the ones to judge the people. And these judges happened to be holding court in the compound of Susanna and her husband, Joachim. And they found Susanna to be very, very beautiful. In fact, she is described in the book of Susanna as being a very fair woman. Now, remember, Susanna is Joachim's wife. So what would happen is that these judges would come and hang around and do their court business from the residence of Joachim and Susanna. Joachim was a very rich man, so I guess he could afford to give them some accommodation for them to go about their court business. But then at around lunchtime, Susanna used to like to go and walk in her very beautiful garden outside. And she was in the view of these 2 old men. And so over time, these men were very, very lustful of her because she was very pretty. And so they devised a plot after observing her that every day at around noontime, she would take a walk in the garden. And normally people would take a break at noon. I'm guessing it was maybe lunchtime. That's the reason they took a break. But sometimes these 2 judges would just sit there and, watch her walking and enjoy her beauty, And so they came up with a plan. And their plan was intended at lying down or having intercourse with Susanna. So what did they do? They said, we're going to go and hide in her garden. And once we hide in her garden, when we know she's alone in her garden and she's about to take a bath, we're going to go approach her. and we'll make sure that her maids have left, and we're going to tell her, hey, lie with us. And if she doesn't lie with us, we're going to accuse her of having been with another young man. And since we are two judges, we will put her on trial and we'll find her guilty. So that is what they did. They found a time to hide in that garden. Can you imagine two old men hiding in a garden? And they approached her when she was alone. She was actually about to take a bath in the garden because it was a hot day. And they asked her to lie with her and she refused. And they said, okay, she said, you know what? If I lie with you guys, I'll be put to death according to the law of Moses. So she knew about the law of Moses because her parents had taught her the laws of Moses. So she was very conversant with that, and she was a very God-fearing woman. But then she also thought, okay, if I lie with you, I'll be put to death. But if I don't lie with you, you will go to court and say you're two witnesses against me. And the law of Moses says where you have two witnesses or more, a matter is established. So it's going to be her word against the word of two old elder men who are judges. So she's kind of caught in a dilemma. But eventually she said, okay, let it be that I will be put on trial, but I'm not going to lie with you, old men. I'm not going to lie with anybody because she knew that would be adultery because she was married. So as soon as she denied to lie with them, they started shouting, oh, and screaming, come and see what we found. We found her. We found her. She was lying with a young man, and the young man has run away. And the young maids came in, or rather, her maids came in, and they were even embarrassed that these two men were accusing her of this. So they were embarrassed for Susanna. But anyway, when all was said and done, she was put on trial. And she was condemned to death based on the two older men and their witness account. And she, thinking that she was going to die, resorted as an act of last resort to pray. So she prayed. She looked up to the heavens and prayed. And Daniel heard about it. And Daniel came to her rescue. And Daniel condemned the people and told them, what is this you have done? How could you pass this judgment of death without examination of the facts and without determining the true account of events? So Daniel requests that they have a retrial, and he conducts the retrial. And the book here describes, or the scriptures here describe it as Daniel was a youthful man at that time, and the Holy Spirit of Daniel came and spoke. So he came and spoke as a young man, and he said, we have to retry this, and they accepted. So he conducted the retrial by separating the two men. And he interviewed the two men, the two old men, and asked them, so you say you saw Susanna committing this act with a young man. What kind of tree were they at when they were committing this act? And because he had separated the two men mentioned two different types of trees. One said, I think it was called a home tree. And another one said, I think it was called something like a masking tree or something like that. So based on that, Daniel determined that these two guys were lying. And therefore, he acquitted her of the charges. And the men were found to be guilty of breaking the law of the commandment of bearing false witness. So they were charged and found guilty, and I believe they were condemned to death. That is the story of Susanna in a nutshell. There will be a lot more details to discuss when we get to it. Then now we talk about the story of the three holy children. And it begins up, we see a story about the prayer of Azariah. Azariah is one of the children. There is three children who in the Bible we know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And we know one of them was Daniel. But in this case, they have different names, but it's the same characters. These are the three characters, the three children who were put into a fire, and king wanted them burnt if they did not worship him as God. So Azariah prays when this chapter starts out, they're in the fire, and Azariah prays. And in his prayer, it's very interesting because it says, they walked in the middle of the fire, praising God and blessing God, the Lord. Then Azariah stood. That caught my eye because if they were walking, why does it say Azariah stood? But anyway, I think the word stood there means something else. And anyway, he stood and prayed in this manner, and he blessed God. He quoted, that God executes true judgments. And he basically asked God to deliver them, and he reminded God of our covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, or Jacob, and the Most High sent an angel who put out that fiery furnace. It was very, very hot that it even killed the servants who are around it managing the fire. So this angel came and put out this fire. I don't know which angel it was because we've been learning about several angels, but the angel came and put out the fire, the very huge fire, which was being created with naphtha, the material that we read about a few weeks ago, pitch, wood, and something called tow. So having been delivered and having put out the fire and even causing the conditions to be very cool and moist instead of very hot and dry, these three started praising and glorifying the Most High. And I think that is why the book is called, or the chapter is called, The Song of the Three Holy Children. And when you read that song or that prayer, it is about 68 verses. And one thing caught my eye in all those 68 verses. About 40 times or so, they repeat this statement: praise and exalt the Most High above all forever. Forever. They repeated that, they being Azarias, Ananias, and Misael. Those names may vary depending on whether you're reading in the Bible, in the book of Daniel, or whether you're reading in this book. But why were they being put in that fire? Because they were supposed to worship Nebuchadnezzar's God, and they wouldn't do that. They would only worship the Most High. So that was the song of the three holy children. Now let's talk about Bel and the dragon. So Daniel is in Babylon, and in Babylon, they have an idol called Bel. And the king gets up every morning and goes and prays at this idol. And the people bring in a lot of animals and food. I think it talked about the people would bring to it 40 sheep, fine flour, and 6 wine bottles or 6 jars of wine, every day. And that Bel idol supposedly was supposed to be eating all that stuff every day. So king one day came in, King Cyrus, And he did his worship to this idol. And he looked at Daniel and he was like, yo, Daniel, why aren't you worshiping this? And Daniel said, no, I only worship the living God. And Daniel said, the king said, well, but are you thinking that Bel is not alive? Don't you see that Bel eats all this food and all this wine that is brought every day? And Daniel laughed and told him, no, 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 king, this Bel is just made of clay and made of iron or something like that. Clay and brass, he's not alive. Um, and and the king was angry, and he called his priests and told them, by the way, the priests were quite a lot of them. There were 70 priests. And he told them, okay, Daniel here says this Bel idol or god of mine is not living. You either tell me who eats all these supplies that we bring in every day, and if it is the Bel, that idol that eats them, then we will have to get rid of Daniel. But if it is somebody who eats them, we will get rid of that person or those people. So it turns out, according to the story, that the king issues that decree and Daniel agrees to it. And so now they go and do the testing to determine, where the food goes. And, in the presence of the king, Daniel takes ashes and sprinkles them all over the temple. He even goes into that temple where they were worshiping Bel. He goes into the temple, sprinkles ashes all around, and they put a seal on the door, and they've left the supplies on the table, and they go. So the 70 priests and their children and their wives do as they do always. They come in during the night, they eat themselves to the full, and they came and did that, and they left. They would have a private entrance that they would use to access the food. So the next morning, the king walks in. King Cyrus is it Cyrus or whoever the king was? I'm forgetting if it was Cyrus. But anyway, yes, King Cyrus. He walks in and he's like, whoa, the food is gone. Daniel, you see, I told you, Bel is alive, And Daniel laughed and told him, no, 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 hold up, hold up. Look at the ashes that I sprinkled. What do you notice? Do you see footprints? Yes, I see footprints of men, women, and children. So, long story short, they call in all these priests. Now, if there were 70 priests, assuming each one was married, that would make 140 people. And assuming they had at least one child, that would make 210 people. If they had more children, then we're talking more than 200 people. That's how they were able to consume all that food every day. So anyway, they arrested all those people, and those people confessed, and those people were executed. All right, somebody needs to mute there. Thank you. So then, that is the story of Daniel and the Babylonian deity of Bel. So all those priests were executed, and Daniel was even given authority over that Bel idol, and he destroyed it. But that was not the only idol that they worshipped or thing that they worshipped. There was also a dragon. This is in Babylon. This sounded very familiar to some places today. We can talk about those places later. So what happened is that there was a dragon, which they worshipped in Babylon. And the king said to Daniel, will you also say that this dragon is made of brass? Behold, he lives, he eats, and he drinks. You cannot say that he is no living God. Therefore, Daniel, you should worship him. Then Daniel said to the king, I will worship the Lord my God, for he is a living God. But give me, O king, give me leave. Let me get some time off, and I shall kill this dragon without a sword or without a staff. So what Daniel did is he went and took pitch, which I think is something like tar, and mixed it with fat, probably animal fat, so that it could be sweet smelling and edible to the dragon. And he also threw in a lot of hair in that mixture. And he created these lumps that he fed or he gave to the dragon, put them in the dragon's mouth. And when the dragon consumed this, the dragon burst and died. And then Daniel came and told the king, behold, are these the gods you worship? So that's how Daniel slay the dragon, you know? And now the people in Babylon were not happy. So they came and rallied and said, this guy called Daniel is turning our king into becoming a Jew or an Israelite. Therefore, they schemed against him and they threatened the king and told him that they would destroy him and his household. So the king succumbed to the pressure, and he took Daniel and delivered him to these guys. And these guys cast Daniel into a lion's den for 6 days, and that den had 7 lions in it. And those 7 lions were fed at least 2 cows and 2 sheep every day. So for those 6 days, they were not giving them that amount of food. Instead, they were waiting for those lions to just consume and eat up Daniel. But behold, after he was thrown into the den, there was a prophet called Habakkuk. I think it might be the same Habakkuk in the Bible. And Habakkuk had made some food. They call it a pottage. He made a meal. And he was approached by the angel of the Most High, and he was asked to take that meal or that food to Daniel. And he did that with the help of an angel. And then, with the help of that angel, after 6 days, with the help of Habakkuk and that angel, after 6 days, the king came to the den of lions. And to his shock and amazement, Daniel was still alive. So on the 7th day, when the king went to the den, he saw Daniel was alive and he was sitting there. And so the king cried out or screamed with a loud voice, saying, great are you, Lord God of Daniel, and there is none other beside you. And so he drew him out and cast those that were the cause of his destruction into the den. And of course, they were devoured in a moment by the lions. So obviously, the Most High caused the lions not to eat Daniel or to kill him, or at least the angel of the Most High. And that, in a nutshell, is the 3 stories for today. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you find this content helpful.